Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to a special update episode of Brain Scratch and Searchlight. We have cases from both shows with significant developments that we want to cover with you guys. And here we are. We're just coming out of April this year, and I've noticed for the past several years, when spring comes, right, as we come out of winter, all of a sudden we get a lot of progress, particularly with missing persons cases. Sometimes it means that they're moving into brain scratch territory. And that's what we certainly have today, but we also have a brain scratch update for you. Basically, we've got 4 updates. We're looking at the Dylan Rounds case, the Sebastian Husted case, the Dr. John Forsyth case, and the Kay-Alana Turner case. Now, before we get to all those, I just have a quick question for you. Are you missing the Wednesday shows? You don't have to. Subscribe over at LordanArts Studio 2 and you will see your same Wednesday shows that we used to feature here, Criminal Impact and Best of Seriously Mysterious. Plus, you'll get a Monday show, Paranormal Perspective, and the ability to join me for a secret studio live stream. All of that at LordanArts Studio 2. You can click the instant subscribe link up here or check out the description box down below. Let's go ahead and get into these case updates. Starting with the update for Dylan Rounds, which we actually featured on our old show, Case Cracked. We pretty much considered this case solved, except there was one big aspect that was missing, and that is where was the body of Dylan? We had a suspect. Let's do just a real brief overview on the case here at people.com. Dylan Rounds was allegedly murdered in 2022. In March of 2023, James Brenner was charged with 1 count of aggravated murder in the death of Dylan Rounds and 1 count of abuse or desecration of a human body. So clearly they had some details. They knew that Dylan was no longer alive. They had the man, but we still didn't have Dylan. Thankfully, that has now changed. We have a Facebook post here from April 9th from the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office saying, on April 9th, skeletal remains presumed to belong to Dylan Rounds were recovered in the remote western Box Elder County area of Lucin. The FBI assisted the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office by processing the area for evidence and recovering the remains. Our hearts go out to the family of Dylan Rounds. We offer our sincerest condolences for the loss of their family member. It's our hope that they can find peace moving forward. We would like to express our gratitude to our deputies, detectives, volunteers, and other Box Elder County employees who have worked tirelessly investigating and assisting in the many search efforts during the past 23 months. No additional information can be released at this time so as to not compromise the ongoing legal proceedings. Now, we do have a couple of news updates to give us some insight into how this discovery happened, but just to get a hard confirmation, the next day, Box Elder County Sheriff's Office posted, update, the Utah Office of the Medical Examiner has confirmed that the remains belong to Dylan Rounds. And there's good reason for that, because basically Brenner is the one that led them to those remains. Over at NBCnews.com, Dateline spoke to Dylan's mother, Candace Cooley. She said that Brenner led authorities to her son's body as part of a plea agreement. Now, this is something that we certainly considered when we did the Case Cracked episode, and it's something that it's hard to measure how families are going to approach something like this. Some families don't want that type of agreement. They want to get the stiffest penalty possible when it comes to court. Other families say, no, we'd rather just be able to bring the remains home and have a proper burial for our loved one. What I'm hoping is that this plea agreement isn't too lenient on Brenner. I mean, this is a terrible crime. This is a case where a young man was getting started in life, had a very big dream for himself, reasonable, but big dream for himself, was out there, was enlisting people to help him with that, and someone took advantage of him. It's really a terrible, terrible story. It always gets me when I see people that are especially, I think Brenner's at least twice as old as Dylan was when this happened, taking advantage of younger people. It always really, really gets me. So there is some type of plea agreement. We don't know the details of that yet. We'll see if we could find some more updates for you guys here. Despite the lingering pain of losing her son, Candace said she's grateful her family finally has some sort of resolution. We were getting ready to plan searches for the summer, she said. Now we don't have to do that. Now, she said, she'll focus on laying Dylan to rest. Once the state lab releases him, he'll be released into the funeral home we have handling everything, Candace told Dateline. we can move forward from there. And we do have a picture of Dylan with his mother, Candace, here. It's still heartbreaking. There's never a good feeling around these types of things. I'm glad they got to that point, because there's a lot of families in similar situations. And for some reason, even if there is a suspect, they will never give up the location, or they try to give up the location and they can't get it right, and the body is never found. So I'm thankful that Dylan's family has that peace. And thankfully, we're still on track for some form of justice. I hope that the plea agreement isn't too kind to Brenner, essentially. Accused killer's hearing set for May. So it's supposedly set for this month. I don't know if that's changed since the discovery. That date was kind of set towards the end of 2023. The hearing for prosecutors to present the evidence against the man accused in Dylan Round's murder is set for 3 days in May. Brenner was formerly charged with aggravated murder. Aggravated murder carries the death penalty. What I'm hoping is that maybe this plea agreement possibly took the death penalty off the board, but I'm hoping that life in prison might still be in play for this. At Brenner's arraignment in April of 2023, prosecutors indicated that they would not be seeking the death penalty according to court records. This does not preclude them from filing their intent to seek capital punishment at a future date. So it could be that they kept that piece in play, and maybe that's the piece that came into play here. I'm not sure. His preliminary hearing was set for May 15th through the 17th, so still a couple of weeks away, and that's if that date holds. At such a hearing, prosecutors present the case to demonstrate minimum evidentiary standards that have been met to warrant charges. The hearing may be a mere formality if a plea bargain has been negotiated. It would be hard to think that that wasn't the case. If he effectively led them to Dylan's body, that is an act that basically has an admission of guilt implied. Now, Dylan's body was out there for a long time. I'm going to be curious to see what the forensic analysis of that is. I don't know what type of weapon could have been used in this. And is it possible that it marked some of the skeletal remains in some way where the medical examiner will be able to clearly identify that? But even without all of that, I think just the way that this has played out, the heavy circumstantial evidence that they had, cell phone tracking and some other things that came into play with this case, I think they've got Brenner exactly where they want him. I'd be very surprised to see this all of a sudden flip to a not guilty. I don't think it can, since there is basically a plea agreement that has been negotiated around this, but you never know. We might still be in for some bumps as this journey continues. And if that's the case, we'll definitely keep you up to date here with all the latest on that. Let's continue into our next case. This is a searchlight that we did many years ago, and actually also brought on Ty's sister to tell us about the case. Where is Sebastian? Ty Husted. Let's jump over to kmzu.com. The Mercer County Sheriff's Office and Centerville Police Department in Iowa are in search of a Centerville teenager. Sebastian Husted, 18, was last seen at a hog confinement facility in Mercer County on January 22nd, 2018. And you might remember there was some strange conditions around this. It sounds like he initially signed up for the work. He was going to be a new father very soon. Sounds like he wanted to start making some money. He kind of took this job of going to help clean up a hog facility. But something seemed to go wrong out there. He wasn't quite getting along with the person that I believe had driven him out there. And all of a sudden he goes missing. You might recall that there was some searches at the hog facility. They actually even drained it at one point, thinking that he might be there. Nothing was found to ever prove that. And for good reason. We get to the discovery that has happened this past month. According to his sister, Aisha Husted, Ty was working as a power washer at a hog barn. A coworker and him carpooled down there, and then the coworker, for one reason or another, left him down there, and he never came home, said Aisha. Ty had been working at the job for about 2 weeks. His sister said that the police were able to ping Ty's cell phone near Mercer County, Missouri on the Monday of his disappearance. And as far as they know, that's the last time that it was shown to be used. Aisha said that the police spoke with Ty's coworker, but the family has never been able to speak with him. We get to April 25th, 2024. Human remains found in northern Missouri. Missouri State Highway Patrol has identified the human remains found by a turkey hunter in the northern part of the state. The remains were discovered Tuesday afternoon on private property in northeast Mercer County along the Iowa state line. MSHP identified the remains as 24-year-old Sebastian Tyrese Husted. Always an unfortunate development when we come to this, and leaves a lingering question, especially when we're dealing with remains that have been out there for several years. Is there going to be enough forensic evidence to get investigators to the next phase? If someone is responsible for this, are they going to be able to be held responsible for this? 18-year-old vanished before birth of his son. It's a day many people have prayed and hoped for. We have found Ty and are bringing him home, his sister said in a Facebook post. While this was never the outcome we wanted, we are relieved our search is over. The question of where is answered. The who, what, when, and why remain. And I'm just hoping that there's some form. The other thing is, frequently in discoveries of this nature, we don't hear about any other evidence that might be found at that scene as well. Is there clothing? Does the clothing tell part of the story? Is there testing, forensic evidence that could be left on that clothing? DNA, blood from someone else, something along those lines. There's a lot of mystery factors that come into play. You know, basically, we and the media just get the very simple explanation of, you know, yep, the body's been found, and that's about it. We have no, are his boots with him? Was his phone with him? Nothing. We have no additional details when it comes to that. So it's hard to know how the case is going to progress from here. But we do actually have another comment from his sister we're going to bump into. And here we go. Here's part of the challenge. Investigators say Iowa teen's cause of death is unknown. According to the Mercer County Sheriff in Missouri, the medical examiner says that there's not enough evidence to determine how he died. So that usually leads me to believe we're not talking about a gunshot or a knife wound, something that would have damaged bone in some way where they would have detected it. Or it could be that the remains were scattered, not enough of them were recovered to actually detect that type of wound as well. But for one reason or another, they're not able to determine cause of death in this case. Aisha Husted said, "I can't believe this went on for 6 years, and he was so close." She said that they still have a lot to process. It's definitely a relief, but at the same time, it's not really, because there's no cause of death that could be determined. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions, but we're definitely relieved that we can finally get him to rest, and he's been found. So I'm just hoping this is one of those cases where maybe there's some other information, maybe based on the location where he was found. All we know is it's private property. Is it possibly tied to the person that might have harmed him in some way? Maybe there's some social information around that. Is there something about the property owners? Have they spoken to someone, or do they know who might have access to their land in some way? I'm still hopeful that there's some other parts of the puzzle in play with this case that might be helpful, but ultimately for the remains themselves, they're not telling us enough of the story at this point. So for Aisha and all of Ty's family, including his son, who is now about 5 years old, and apparently, from what his sister says, is a little clone of Ty. I hope that these answers are coming for them. Jumping to a case that we covered not too long ago, I think it's only been a couple months, the death of Dr. John Forsyth. Some think it's related to crypto. Others are looking closer to home. It's interesting because the press on this case was very strong about one particular message. Let's do just a tiny refresher with you guys on this. Dr. John Forsyth's disappearance and slaying has baffled those closest to him. The family of Dr. John Forsyth told Fox News Digital that he was shot once in the head. He did not kill himself, according to his brother, Richard Forsyth. And Richard was very clear about this in interviews, several publications. That message was coming through again and again. And if I recall correctly, it was that's what the investigators were basically telling Richard. It wasn't his determination. It was, what I'm being told is this isn't something that John did to himself. Richard also learned that John was likely murdered the same day he vanished in Cassville, Missouri, a rural town of 3,100 people. The victim's family believes that he was abducted. And we're going to touch, there's a lot of strange pieces of this case that, quite honestly, even with this new discovery that they're saying has happened, still big questions left. But back to the quote from his brother: "This was planned. This was very neatly done, and it is very sinister," Richard said. "I want to know if my family's in danger. I want to know if I'm in danger. We don't have that information." This is another case where John was also about to become a father again, I believe for the 9th time, if I'm recalling correctly. And part of the twist in this, as I started looking into all the media and getting my head around this, was a quote that happened over at KY3 News when they interviewed his brother Richard. And Richard admitted that a warrant had been served at his house, and police came and asked him some tough questions, and in particular wanted to trace down a gun that Richard was known to have. And that, of course, just kind of threw this whole question mark about, is there something closer to home that is part of this case? We know that that's how the investigation went. We know that those are the directions that were looked at. One thing we didn't hear really strongly about, outside from Richard saying, we're being told that he didn't do this to himself, we didn't hear anything from law enforcement about that possibility. Well, let's get over to the latest news on this. The Arkansas State Crime Lab medical examiner ruled that the death of Dr. John Forsyth was indeed done by him, his own hand. According to the Benton County Sheriff's Office, the investigation is still open while it's finalizing investigative tasks. And I believe that's because there's some bizarre questions still around this. Forsyth was last seen at 7 a.m. on Sunday, May 21st, 2023, walking towards his RV, which was parked at Mercy Hospital in Cassville, Missouri. He then failed to show up to work at the hospital. His vehicle was later located at the Cassville Aquatic Center. You might remember from the episode, his car parked in this kind of strange area, and apparently footage from that location of some white SUV that goes and drives up that he seemingly interacts with. And then the SUV takes off and he kind of goes walking off in a different direction. So kind of interesting that there's just all these touch points of questions. The sheriff's office says Benton County detectives were able to find several surveillance videos of Forsyth riding a bicycle to the area of Lost Bridge at Beaver Lake. The bicycle was found near the area where his body was found. So just to kind of try to make sense out of this, and this is part of the question that I have. I'm not following what the methodology is here in terms of their conclusion that he actually did this to himself. So we know he works at Mercy Hospital, Cassville. We know for some reason his car is discovered here in the aquatic center, in the back end of it, in this kind of closed off lot. We hear this story that there's some interaction that happened there with an SUV that was driving up. It'd be one thing if he got in that SUV, because we know his body is found over 20 miles south of this. Like if that was a Lyft or some type of driver that he had arranged for to come pick him up there, this story would kind of start falling together. But we don't have that. So we have him leave. I think his laptop was also left in his car. Just a lot of important items, including the keys. Car left unlocked, but for some reason hidden, kind of, about a mile away from where it should have been, which would normally be in the parking lot at Mercy Hospital, where he keeps his RV, because basically this guy works so hard. He goes out to his RV and kind of lives in the parking lot and then goes back to work. Of course, he does have a home. He has a new fiance at this time. So what I'm curious about, and they're not being very clear about, is where is this footage of the bicycle, and is the presumption that for some reason he drives his car over there, leaves it there? Does he walk back to the hospital? First of all, is it his bike? If it is, does he walk back to the hospital to get it? Was it on a rack on the back of the car? It's weird because we heard from his family that they did, I believe that they at least got the information. I don't know if they saw the footage for themselves, but I know his brother was the one that was relaying this information about the white SUV. If there was a camera that could pick that up, wouldn't there be some camera that picked up, oh, all of a sudden John was seen leaving that parking lot on a bicycle? That's not the description we got. We got that he was seen walking away from the scene. So where does the bicycle come from? We don't know. Then we get to this map and we have this crazy distance. Now, admittedly, about 30 miles on a bicycle, not impossible to do. If we check Google Maps here, it says that that's going to take about 3 hours. But that's a lot of time. And it's putting him on highways, tons of people. Like, what I don't get is the intent of, it seems strange to me, like he's hiding his car, which I don't know why. But then he's going to go take this big open road to get to where he's going to do this and possibly be spotted by a bunch of people, to the point of, that's what law enforcement is saying, that basically they have surveillance video of him riding his bicycle to this area, to the Lost Bridge area down by Beaver Lake. So I'm just curious about it. I don't know if they've picked up traces of him all along this whole route. I don't know if they've just picked up traces of him near this area. So I think that's why the investigation might still be open. I think there's questions that they still haven't quite firmed up about this. And quite possibly, it seems to me the question of, is someone else involved in this story in some way, really isn't answered very strongly. Who did he meet up with here with his car? What was that about? And then, was someone else part of this in any way? I think that's kind of part of the lingering question, and maybe why this hasn't been completely closed out. His brother, Richard Forsyth, said John was last seen alive on security cam footage of a parking lot at a public pool in Cassville, Missouri. Richard said John was seen leaving his car unlocked with his wallet still inside and getting into a separate vehicle before driving away. Now, that explanation is a little different from what I recall, and unfortunately, there's different sources on this. I don't think that he actually got in that vehicle and drove away. If I recall correctly, the other sources I read said that he interacted with someone in the car drove away, but he did not. Richard said John texted his fiancée that morning saying he'd see her soon. So yeah, lots of questions left with this one, but it's one of those cases where we might not ever have those answers. I'll be curious to see how long it is until this case is officially closed. And if it is officially closed, if there's any new information that comes out, or even just a reaffirmation about, no, we've put this together. We know where he got the bike. We have footage of him effectively all along the route. We know what route he took. Maybe some additional detail. I don't recall if the gun was actually found with him. I don't remember if that was public information or not. I don't think that police would have gone asking his brother, hey, we want to see your gun, if they found a gun at the actual scene. And if they didn't find a gun at the scene, that's also kind of a bizarre question that is out there lingering. Maybe that's another reason why the investigation's still open. Just a lot to consider with this one. And like in so many cases, not nearly as many answers as questions. So you may recall we covered the case of Kay-Alana Turner. We then had her family come on to share some updates that they had, share their feelings about what they were going through. And we have had a major discovery in that case as well. Let's just retouch on this. It was back in March of 2023. A search is underway for a missing woman after her vehicle was found abandoned in Tomball. The parents of Margaret Kay-Alana Turner, 27 years old, believe she is suffering a mental health crisis and is in a fight-or-flight frame of mind. According to a warrant now issued for Turner's arrest, on March 10th, deputies were dispatched to a suspicious vehicle call. A homeowner reported that there was an unknown vehicle parked in her driveway, and the driver refused to leave the property. If you didn't see the previous episode, this whole interaction is a bit of a point of contention, certainly for her family, but also for anyone that just hears this story. They roll up on her. She's sleeping in her car, parked in a stranger's driveway, effectively. And they attempt to wake her up. I believe they're knocking on the window initially. She wakes up and she's completely freaked out. And I don't know if they're shining a light in her eyes. I mean, we don't have that level of detail, obviously. She starts pulling away. And the story that I recall, and we still haven't seen good clarification of through the media, is somehow one of the deputies grabs what's been described as a 2x4 and tries to break her window with it. So that's got to be a terrifying sight. And at this point, she's driving off. I think she went through a fence, if I recall correctly, and then kind of drives off into a wilderness area. So, knowing this, of course, in hindsight, knowing that she's going through some type of emotional episode through all this, has really just raised a question about police engagement. We'll touch on this a little bit more kind of as we wrap up the updates on this, but let's continue here. The defendant placed the vehicle in drive and began driving off the driveway. The defendant drove through the front lawn and struck the fence. One of the deputies was nearly hit and at one point had to break the window to try to get her out, but she got away driving through a wooded area. Turner's vehicle was found abandoned shortly afterward, less than a mile from the scene. Just a terrible occurrence all the way around. Parents of missing Beaumont women say Harris County Sheriff's Office has not been transparent. The one-year anniversary of the disappearance of Kay-Alana Turner is approaching. Rosa and Robbie Calhoun say they will continue to relentlessly pursue answers. They claim the department that last saw her has not been transparent while investigating her disappearance. So they already had a bit to be upset about just hearing about this interaction and how it all went down. But then this happens. All of a sudden we have law enforcement kind of saying, oh, she's been cited several times. And when they go to ask for information about that, they're being told, oh, who said that? No, we didn't say that. In January, Rosa saw an official statement online from the Harris County Sheriff's Office saying her daughter had been seen in a neighboring county. But that glimmer of hope quickly vanished when the Calhouns say they contacted the missing persons detective assigned to Turner's case, and he denied his office's statement. He said, no, we haven't seen her. She hasn't been reported. I said, you guys need to retract that. You all need to change that, Rosa said. The sheriff's office did revise their statement, but questions about Turner's whereabouts remained unanswered. Any Harris County Sheriff's deputy that we came into contact with treated us cruelly, said Rosa. They were treating her daughter like a fugitive, which we spoke to the family about. It was another bizarre occurrence in this, where because she was a fugitive, they wouldn't effectively file the missing persons report. They wouldn't treat her as a missing person. They wanted to treat her as a fugitive because of this story, which honestly, we don't know. We haven't seen the dash cam footage. The family has not seen any body or dash cam footage to support this, but the story from law enforcement is that she almost hit one of them, and because of that, there might have been charges that they were holding against her, and that's what gave her this fugitive status. Her father says here, just simple embarrassment. She had to be painted to be a much more dangerous criminal that she was not at all. So that's what the family was going through last year around this case. But then we get to this spring. Family of Kay-Alana Turner believes her remains may have been found. Texas EquiSearch found what is believed to be the remains of the 27-year-old Southeast Texas woman not far from where she was last seen. They found the remains while searching on a private property in Magnolia. So two things to touch on here. One, obviously, having law enforcement report that there's been sightings of her in a neighboring county, probably not true. We have her body found close to where she was last seen. Also, the second thing, found on private property. And we know because of our good friendship with our friend Jason Watts, who helped with the Brandon Lawson case, this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to cases of this nature. We have someone that leaves their vehicle, they go running off into the dark, they disappear, and we have trouble finding them. Private property searches effectively require some level of permission, and even law enforcement can't just go onto that private property. So there needs to be some negotiation that happens with the owners. The owners have to agree to it. Sometimes there has to be contracts that are written up, waiving liability for the searchers that will go there to look. There's a bit of technical hurdle. I mean, even in Brandon Lawson's case, it took years for them to get in contact with the right property owner because they weren't living on the property. They just kind of bought it and they were letting people hunt on it, if I recall correctly, and that was it. So they just weren't interacting regularly with the area. They didn't even know that some guy had gone missing near their property. So this is always another challenging position when it comes to these missing persons cases, getting access to those private properties and then getting the search efforts out there to do those searches. Of course, if you're lucky enough to get Texas EquiSearch out there, you have discoveries like we're seeing here. They're awaiting positive identification from the medical examiner. It says, from what we know, she has been in the presence of God since that date. So it seems like she died pretty quickly after that interaction, which of course raises other questions. What exactly happened to her out there? She went driving off. She jumped out of the car, went running off, and then what? Was there some tragic accident? We have a quote here. On Friday, April 19th, 2024, human remains were found in honor of Kay-Alana's birthday. Today, April 22nd, please direct any questions to Texas EquiSearch. And I just wanted to highlight that because they found her remains just a few days before her birthday. To the parents of Kay-Alana, Rabbi and Rosa Calhoun, we thank you for your continued trust in our planning and search efforts. Many times we asked you to be patient with us as we planned additional searches and searched for others who had gone missing since March 10th, 2023. And you did exactly that. You waited respectfully as we planned additional searches. You are selfless, you are God-driven, and you are the catalyst that motivated us to never give up. They are very, very sweet people. In terrible situations, I consider it an honor to meet people like this. Robbie and Rosa, and I was also sure to send them a little private message around this discovery as well. And I hope that this is helping them in some way, but I know that there was a lot of other factors at play here that the discovery of Kay-Alana might not necessarily exacerbate, but it's not going to lay those down. You know, when you've gone through a year of questioning how law enforcement treated your daughter, another year after that of questioning how law enforcement is treating you, that's a pretty tough place to be in. We got some quotes here over at Fox 7 Austin from Tim Miller himself, the founder of Texas EquiSearch. Finally recovered some human remains. Texas EquiSearch has been on the case since the very beginning. The founder said his team searched tirelessly for Kay-Alana by conducting at least 20 searches over the past year. The area she was found in was certainly thick with weeds and woods, he said. She was actually found right around 900 feet, we're figuring, from where her car was last seen. Now, that whole factoid has spun a whole lot of conversation in my circles with, my friend Jason Watts, with our co-producer Christy Arnhart. I even had Ed Densel from Unfound reach out and say, John, what is it with these cases? Like, why are we finding these bodies eventually and finding that they're so close? Like, are the searches not being done right? Is there something that's going on with that? And for this particular case, the only thing I could point to is that private property aspect. It's one thing if people go running off on public property and then you get all the professional searchers out there, the volunteer searchers out there. But once you have this condition of private property, it just changes the game and it makes it that much more complex. Now, it does raise a question, and this is kind of interesting. Ed was talking to me about he's not so confident in search dogs. And I don't know. I hadn't really considered that, but thinking, I imagine that law enforcement, while they're out there, even if they were considering her a fugitive, they were going to use whatever tools they had at their disposal. Did they not run some type of search dog out there? And if they had her personal items in her car, couldn't they have gotten a good sample for the dog off that? Knowing that she's effectively now, 900 feet sounds like it's not that far. 900 feet is quite a bit of distance. We're talking 3 football fields there, and consider that there's 360 degrees. If we consider that car the center point, you've got 360 degrees in all these different directions that effectively you can go off into to find this. But Ed's comment about the dogs kind of has me wondering a little bit about the effectiveness. I'm really not sure. And then keeping in mind that if she did expire close to this actual event, did they run cadaver dogs out there at all? Wouldn't they have possibly detected her? It's leaving a lot of questions in a case where there's already some hard eyes towards law enforcement and how they handled this case. It's kind of raising more questions and asking, was this thing just mishandled? It's hard to shake that. Miller says that this weekend was set to be the final search for Kay-Alana. Well, for a good reason, it is. In a dramatic turn of events, crews made the discovery during their final search efforts. It's amazing. Never, ever gave up. We just always went back, said Miller. And we're thankful that they do that. Rest in peace. Remains confirmed as those of Kay-Alana Turner. So we do have the confirmation. Miller also said, basically, we were looking at skeletonized remains. So kind of same conditions as we've talked about earlier. Determining cause of death might not be easy in this case as well. The Montgomery County Forensic Center pathologists were able to confirm through dental records that the found bones were that of Margaret Kay-Alana Turner. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office is hopeful that this positive identification can provide some much-needed closure to her family, said MCSO in a Facebook post. Our thoughts and prayers are with them during this difficult time. Family, loved ones, and friends of Kay-Alana posted as well. After 407 days, Kay-Alana has been found. We love Kay. God loves her more. She has been met with the kindness of the Lord, the post noted. A very sweet message and a very sweet sentiment there. But, of course, leaving us with that question, what could have happened in this case? In Ty's case, foul play seems like a likely situation. In Dylan's case, we know that foul play is a component. What exactly happened? When you have someone that goes running off into the dark of night, how does their life get taken from them? There is a little factor in Kay-Alana's case that might shed some light on this. Angela Ferris, who is the deputy director of Texas EquiSearch, went into more details about the search. We understand that she crossed over to Spring Creek, then crossed the creek. I believe we had heard that in our original coverage, or maybe her parents told her that. I was familiar that it was believed she had crossed the creek. Then went north onto the private property. She had some cardiac issues. She did have asthma. Her inhaler was actually in the car, not on her person when she left the vehicle. So I don't know the depth of the cardiac issues, but having asthma, if she had some type of attack, she's off running in the middle of the night. Could that have been what happened? Certainly a possibility. But then, of course, we have these cardiac issues, and knowing that she was in some heightened stress issue, could that have come into play as well? Certainly a possibility. Like I mentioned earlier, tragic death of Kay-Alana Turner prompts dialogue on mental health crisis response and de-escalating situations. This is a tricky conversation because we have law enforcement being called out. We have some people that are living in a community saying, hey, there's some stranger that's, parked in our driveway. And how fast are these things moving? You drive up, put yourself in law enforcement's shoes for a minute. You drive up, you get out of your car, you're walking up to the window, you see this person sleeping, you knock on the window, she pops awake, she's upset, you're trying to tell her, get out of the car, you want to talk to her, she starts it up. Like, we're talking seconds, and these little micro decisions that are happening along that whole way. When have they had the opportunity to recognize, oh, wait, this is someone that might be going through a mental health crisis at this point? I think that's why this conversation is so important, because there needs to be some mechanisms built into that initial approach that give the officers kind of their best shot at handling that situation right. Could there have been some de-escalation that happened around this? Honestly, we don't know. We weren't there. Maybe they made the perfect approach in terms of trying to de-escalate her, and there was nothing they could do. She just got ramped up and started up the engine, and she was off and driving. We really don't know, but I do think it's important to talk about these situations. We do have this type of situation come up on the channel frequently, in the country frequently, with interactions with people that for one reason or another are dealing with something severe emotionally. And is law enforcement best equipped to handle that? We've got some ideas on that happened in this article, and that's why I want to share them with you guys. Nicole Milton, training manager at Mental Health America of Greater Houston, emphasized that warning signs may not always be evident, which I totally understand. The ones that we're probably used to seeing the most are people who are agitated or have out of control behavior. When it comes to de-escalating situations, it's advised to introduce oneself and inquire about their names. Now, this is kind of written from the perspective of not law enforcement necessarily, but maybe like the homeowners. Maybe someone could have gone down and kind of knocked on the window. I'm John. What's your name? Are you okay? Do you need some help? Is there something we can do for you? Do you realize that you're parked in someone else's driveway? Like maybe there could have been some approach that happened from the homeowners there. If there's a lack of response and the situation escalates or poses a danger, contacting emergency services is recommended. Additionally, other options include reaching out to mobile crisis outreach teams or crisis intervention teams, CITs, for assistance. If you want to approach that person, try to have a presence of calmness and even a tone of voice to let that person know you are listening and offering help, Milton said. Such an important comment there. And interesting to hear that some police departments, we're hearing about Houston. The Houston Police Department has a CIRT team that pairs Houston CIT officers with a licensed clinician. So this is kind of in the best case scenario, right? Someone has been identified, they're having some type of mental health crisis. It's called into law enforcement as there's someone parked in our driveway. It seems like they're having a mental health issue of some kind. They would deploy this appropriate team at that point. So even this is a little different than the interaction that happened in Kay-Alana's situation. But dream scenario here. Instead of just sending out a police officer, you're sending out an officer with someone who is a mental health professional, and they can help de-escalate that person so that you can get them a sense of calm, Milton explained. Sometimes when people are moving into crisis and they see law enforcement, that can also escalate their crisis and feel like they're about to be in danger. I think there's no question at all that that is pretty much what happened in this case, and why this case should be analyzed and looked at more for that to be understood. And I do believe for that to happen, that the body cam footage should be at least released academically in some way. Outside of that, I think it would be very decent to release it to the family, or at least give them some review of it. Bring them into the police station, let them watch it for themselves, so that they can have some better understanding of this situation. Because without that, it's essentially a big black box. Their biggest fears about that interaction are going to be what haunt them for the rest of their lives. And that's really, really unfair in this situation. It's also unfair to law enforcement, because it could be that, if her parents sit down and watch that footage, they go, oh, wow, we understand now that there was no time for you guys to understand this situation. It moves very quickly. I'm concerned, because that hasn't happened, that there might be something about that footage that law enforcement just isn't feeling super confident about. If it is having to do with an officer grabbing a 2x4 to break a window, I really wish we could get over that to try to give this family some peace in this situation. But that's just how I feel about it. And again, I just want to put that message out there. Release this for the analysts to use, so that better situations can happen as a result, so that people can learn from this situation. There's definitely some lessons in here, one way or the other. So maybe there's some way for that to happen. Well, that is it for all the updates we're doing this spring. It seems like we need an update episode about once a quarter. But we'll be back with a regular episode for you guys next Friday. Keep in mind, if you want those Wednesday shows, check out LordanArts Studio 2. And of course, we always do these presentations with limited commercials. We can't do that without the support of many amazing people. I want to give a very big thank you to new patron Second Breakfast. And if you want to become one of our supporters, please visit LordanArts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Ann Peters recently did. Also, would you like to meet me? Maybe come and hang out with some of your favorite true crime creators? I'm at 2 events coming up this year. You can come meet me at CrimeCon 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee from May 31st to June 2nd. You can save 10% off a standard pass there by entering the code LordanArts. I will also be at the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival. That's in Denver, Colorado from July 12th to the 14th. You can save 15% off of that pass by using code Lordan. I have links for both of those events in the description box down below. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Take care, and please join us here again next week on the LordanArts channel.